Well, it's only Thursday again, and today's date is May the 7th. This is the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams. Trigger alert. Hi all and welcome to the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. The great question of the day, and we'll reflect in this show, is how can you build a society when the nurturing archetype mistrusts and neglects the few people who are actually nice, caring and kind-hearted? Well, the answer is you can't, and that has to change. And that change starts with you. Everything is twisted these days by assumptions, largely based on the insecurity of the self and people's own off-balance mindset. Now, this show is a summary of events just past and unfolding, and it does confirm many of our previous shows again and predictions in all too clear a fashion. Which is why our group is targeted by all and sundry, with a plethora of agents within the alt media circle, the old alt media circuit, I might add, playing a role within it, all designated to bring down one man and one group. And you have to ask yourself why. It boggles the mind, it really does. Well, there are a number of reasons I can cite, but the key is we came up with a plan of improving this planet and without anyone having overall control. And that's the gist of it. Recent hilarious attempts to discredit me borders on child-level theatrics of stitching together a series of shows to make it look like our narrative is different. And they have managed to create some doubts in some people, and some people have left our group to join theirs. Fine. But that is also the purge from our group, as I see it. A purge of the easily swayed, fence-sitting, zero inner and shadow work do-nothings. No exceptions. If not, then prove me wrong and act in the right way. Mired in their own inability to improve themselves and terrified of the possibility of them having to exhibit some personal responsibility, because ours is a working group that they have to participate in, not like the weight clubs in the rest of the alt media. And this is part of a larger plan to get me and Kim to quit, split us up and create division amongst the people. Well, I for one will not be quitting, no matter who else does, no matter how many drop me in the alt media, so they can carry on doing what they do, as it will not affect how I do things. Many have tried to control, use, sway or abuse me to throw me off track, and all have failed. so they can keep on wasting their own energy, as it makes no difference to me whatsoever. I will continue to do what I've always done. Fight for humanity. It's what I do, and it's what I'm about, whether alone or in a group. It matters not to me. Now, for those new, and we have a lot of new, THI Team Bubba is nothing to do with us, and it is run by a group of child trafficking, child solicitation and child torture pedophiles. It contains demons, witches, agency shills, hackers, drug and alcohol addicts, criminals who are buying off their crimes by trolling, Rothschild's family members and agents with links to lead Democratic senators and officials who are desperate to cover up their own crimes exposed in our show, and involvement with abusing children. And also they have connections to the Blackwater mercenary group leader Eric Prince. This is a group who admitted blocking the trust funds, a group who openly celebrated the early and painful death of someone's sibling. That is what those people have joined because of their alleged hatred of one man. The one man who showed them a better path they refused to take. So having taken 18 months to perfect their only skill of copy and paste, they have now developed a new skill of stitching shows together, all to serve a point of their own stupidity. And so here is our response to their failure to do anything right, and show how they have developed from one skill set to another. In 18 months, they have only managed to add less than 100 other do-nothings, and repeatedly failed every time. Reminiscent of who they work for, really. The Cabal. Failed again. That was their old skill. This is their new one.
Well, get her done. Get off of that pew and put your hands behind your back. Get off of that computer, put your hands behind your back. Well, you trolled my page 'cause you're an angry man. I said stitch, copy and paste. Stitch, copy and paste. Stitch, copy and paste. Stitch, copy and paste. Well, you never do nothing to save your doggone soul. Yeah. Wearing those dresses with your hair done up so nice. Wearing that onesie with the black and white stripes. You look so warm, but your heart's as cold as ice. I said stitch, copy and paste. Stitch, copy and paste. Stitch, copy and paste. I said stitch, copy and paste. Well, you never do nothing to save your doggone soul. Woo! Go! The drinky one. Having fun. Get her done.
Just classic. And that's all you can do with these people. 18 months to develop one skill set. But then, when you only have one brain cell between the whole group, that's what you get. Right, let's get on with some more interesting bits in the show. I want to apologise to those on Patreon. I've been a bit behind in posting the transcript of the shows recently, but I've managed to catch up quite a bit this week. I'm also still struggling to get to emails as quick as I would like. So I'm asking people to have some patience on that, please. And I'm requesting now people not send me videos to watch via emails. I just do not have the time to watch any of them anymore. So thanks. Right. What have we got for this week? Well, as California threatens to remove alleged sick people from their homes into detention centres. Sounds all very FEMA to me, that. And then we have the state of Washington is training geese to attack non-compliant golfers on a stay-at-home policy. You know, if ever there was a social distancing sport, golfing is it. And then a professor researching COVID-19 is found dead and called suicide, which is a marked change as all other deaths are now marked as the coronavirus. A woman arrested for cutting people's hair. Another arrested for doing nails in her home. Predictably, New York working with Gates on mandatory child vaccines for the state. And then we have Robert David Steele saying pedophilia, which says child love, has nothing to do with child abuse, unquote. And then you have the Chicago mayor stating, anyone not staying at home, we will, quote, we will shut you down, we will cite you, and if we need, we will arrest you and take you to jail, period, unquote. And yet I'm the focus of the problem, it seems, to the recently addressed people and who they are connected to. And no wonder this planet's in a mess. It's not about me. It's about the lack of focus. I'm just the easy target, you see, and therein lies the problem. And then we have other reports about the hospitals are getting $13,000 for reporting a COVID-19 case, even if it was a heart attack. And $39,000 if you're on a ventilator. All about the money. And some people still think that we're ready for the trust fund release. Not in my book, we're not. And that is my opinion. But that is not my choice. That lies solely with the trustee only. But until money no longer becomes the latest god and must have, and the propensity to earn it at all costs, then the reality is the trust funds will always be wasted. And the desire for money supersedes all morals, values, virtues and honour, it appears to me. And the question remains on file largely unanswered. But are the people and the desire for money at all costs the real virus? This next item is something I warned about first in Cosmic Voice and was dismissed by many as not possible. Remember me talking about the caliphate. And in light of the intel last week of Macron installed as world leader for this, when it was allegedly going to be Mr. Trump, and a ceremony to take place in Russia to announce it, but the Pope proclaimed Macron in a recent announcement. Now this report is from last year, but the date is now coming closer to fruition, and why I put this in this week. In a renewed and enthusiastic endorsement of globalism, Pope Francis has announced he is hosting an initiative for a global pact to create a new humanism. The global event set to take place at the Vatican on May the 14th 2020 is themed Reinventing the Global Education Alliance. And according to a Vatican statement that was issued in September of last year, the Pope is inviting representatives of the main religions, international organisations and various humanitarian institutions, and take that with a pinch of salt, as well as key figures from the world of politics, economics and academia, prominent athletes, scientists and sociologists, all to sign a global pact on education, so as to hand on to younger generations a united and fraternal, there's the brotherhood, common home. In a typically secular message or untypical secular message containing only one throwaway reference to the Lord, we all know who he was, Pope Francis called on people to capitalise on our best energies. Members of THI will know exactly what that means or the hidden meaning of it, and to be proactive in opening education to a long-term vision unfettered by the status quo. This, he said, will result in men and women who are open, responsible, prepared to listen, dialogue and reflect with others, and capable of weaving relationships with families, between generations and with civil society, and thus to create a new humanism. Sounds all so nice. But their version of open is the data mining program called open source. He then went on to quote Hillary Clinton, of all people. "It takes a village to raise a child," she said. Pope Francis asserted the need to create an, quote, educational village in which all people, according to their respective roles, share the task of forming a network of open human relations. Ask why he put an emphasis on the word human. Is he telling you there are non-humans? Is humanism a euphemism for transhumanism? And is this the rise of the robots? But the things arising from this in your face now is a public global government, a public global religion, and a public centralisation of power. Why do I say public? Because they have had a one world government for a long, long time. There was only ever one religion, Hebrew Anunnaki. All the rest are subsidiaries and divide and conquer programs. And by decentralising, which is what they warned you of via the Bitcoin program, is them centralising all power to an even fewer numbers. That's the gist of it. Education, to those new to our show, means training of animals. Look it up yourself. So that tells you right there their full intentions. So clearly they are still planning our demise in some quarters, and what our response is the key. We in this group have made giant strides. Many of you. But then a plethora of ridiculous comments, suggestions and wild allegations surface now and again in our group, and it did again this week. And that allows me an opportunity to overview it all and see where we are, and answer some questions for further clarity of the situation as well, for those who doubt and those who are new to our show. And that will be later in the show. Right, let's get into a few news items. Not many. Some interesting ones. Michigan House of Representatives declined to extend Governor Gretchen Whitmer, Zeke Heil, state of emergency another 28 days, and instead voted on Thursday to sue her. Whitmer's initial state of emergency order, which is separate from the stay-at-home order, expires on Thursday and requires legislative action to be lengthened. Now, negotiations on that front fell apart on Wednesday when Whitmer refused to make any concessions on the matter, asserting she has the ultimate control of emergencies. Really? So the House voted to authorise Speaker Lee Chatfield to sue the governor, saying Whitmer's unchecked and undemocratic approach is not the best way, and the current status quo relies on a one-size-fits-all edicts that unfairly punish millions of people across the state without giving them any recourse or voice in the process, Chatfield said. And he or she, the people deserve a better solution and we can provide it. Now, the House also passed a resolution restricting a governor's state of emergency declaration to 14 days. Whitmer has vowed to veto that legislation, and hundreds of protesters gathered outside the Capitol and demanded the state be reopened. We want Michigan open. We want Michigan back to work, said Jason Howland, who's one of the protest organisers. Interesting tidbit on coincidence, or is it coincidence, that remdesivir, Remdesivir, is made by Gilead, or Gilead, and is the cure for COVID-19. And here is where it gets interesting. China holds the patent on the drug through an agreement with Gilead drug patent sharing subsidiary branch called Unitaid, the UN, who has an office coincidentally near Wuhan. And you'll never guess who are the main financial investors in that place. Unitaid. None other than George Soros, Bill and Melinda Gates, and the World Health Organization. And I know what you're all thinking. It's all just a coincidence, isn't it? But then there's further coincidences that Gilead and Unitaid were financial supporters of Hillary Clinton. And if there's any doubts, there's one more coincidence. Fauci was one of the authorising millions to be sent to the Wuhan Institute of Virology, specifically for the study of coronaviruses. All just a coincidence. Nothing to see here. It's all a conspiracy theory, so we'll all move along. Not. Landlords in Venice are calling Los Angeles City Councilman Mike Bonin exploitative and predatory after Bonin and pitched a proposal to use federal stimulus money to buy up distressed properties that go belly up and turn them around into housing for the homeless. They use that will doing something for the homeless whilst they collect assets on the cheap. And Bonin made the comment during a teleconference last week, saying, I intend on putting in another proposal in the next week or two that asks the city to look at the federal bailout or stimulus funds we'll be getting as a result of this crisis and use some of that to either buy hotels or distressed properties that are absolutely going to be on the market at cheaper prices after this crisis is over. No surprise, California is only a close second to New York for snake oil salesmen. I saw a map of America this week of where the bulk of the so-called COVID-19 events were. All the usual places where money is harvested from the people, and snake oil salesmen are most prolific. Yes, California. Yes, New York. Yes, Connecticut. Yes, Washington. Yes, Chicago. Yes, Texas. And yes, Florida. The rest of the country is practically empty of cases. So why did they report it there? Because they're the ones that are going to put the hand in the cookie jar and take all the funds out. It's what those particular states do. Because the ones that run them are all bogus. So Bonin said and used that as a homeless and affordable housing. Well, why didn't you do that before? And it's going to be a hell of a lot cheaper to purchase stuff that is already there and move people in there than if we start from scratch, really. And he said the city has a unique opportunity right now to use federal funds, so they'll ask for more money. Those states I've just mentioned all take all the pot. That's how it works in this country. To quickly get people on the streets housed. Well, what have you done in the past 2 decades to help the homeless? Zero. But now here's a snake oil opportunity to buy up loads of houses on the cheap and make it out that they're going to put homeless in. Wasn't it? Didn't we do a piece last year about California not helping the homeless, actually refusing? But now, when there's money to be had, we'll make it look like we're claiming for the homeless. They're not interested. Corrupt LA, just like New York, and taking advantage of the situation for their own illicit gains, no doubt run by Feinstein and Co. She's in trouble. It's not in this show, but she's in trouble for her China connections. And here's the spin-off of this fake lockdown. People are getting killed. Calvin Munnerlyn, who worked hard to provide for his family as a security guard at a Family Dollar in Flint, who was a father of 9, was gunned down after turning a customer away for trying to enter the store without a mask. On Monday, Genesee County Prosecutor David Layton charged 3 suspects in the murder, and a 45-year-old Sharmel Teague, 44-year-old Larry Edward Teague Jr. and 23-year-old Ramon Yaya Bishop. And the prosecutor said decisions like stay at home when we can, wearing a mask when going to the store, and staying a safe distance from those around us, these should not be political arguments, and they do not necessitate excuse me, acts of defiance, and we simply cannot devolve into an us versus them mentality. But the gist of this is, you must wear the mask, because the government said they would keep you safe. The question remains is, if the masks keep you safe, why are they concerned with people who don't? And if masks are essential to all people's health, why aren't politicians wearing them, or portal people, or agency-based clowns, or military generals, or the scientists that come up to the Trump podium? Not one of them are wearing a mask. Cops pulling people up, no mask. Are they somehow different? And if these masks and the government are about keeping you safe, why isn't there a mandatory mask wearing lesson to be observed during flu season in all hospitals, doctors, dentists or clinics? Far more people die of flu each year, and yet if the government and these masks work, why haven't they implemented them before during the flu season in those locations? And if vaccines work, why are they concerned about an unvaccinated person? And why, with all the research and medical expertise, have they not come up with a safe bacteria spray for people to spray in their mouths when required, like they have for bad breath? I wonder why. Because they're not interested in our health is why. And at this point, if they made vaccines voluntary, you all know many will take it. And you know what? At some point we have to let them take their City of Light pills and move on. Helping others who won't help themselves becomes an abject lesson in frustration as they repeat the same shit over and over again, and nobody asks the questions. BlackRock Inc. Black Sun Chief Executive Officer Larry Fink, born in, born to, had a stark message for a private audience this week. As bad as things have been for corporate America in recent weeks, he said, they're likely to get worse. No shit, Sherlock. He predicted mass bankruptcies. It was happening before. 12,500 in the first 3 weeks of this year. Empty planes, cautious consumers, and an increase in the corporate tax rate to as high as 29% were part of a vision Fink sketched out on a call this week. And there you have it. They're going to increase the taxes to pay back the stimulus checks, of which hardly any have been sent out since. I did warn you, did I not? And this was the message from the so-called leader of the world's biggest asset manager, and it contrasts with the tones of a stock market that has snapped back from recent lows. And he's been advising President Trump, apparently, on how to navigate the effects of the coronavirus pandemic. And it is said that BlackRock is playing a key role in the Federal Reserve's efforts to stabilise markets and helping the central bank, listen closely, buy billions of dollars in assets. What did we tell you months ago? In fact, it was over a year ago. They're going to crash America and buy all the businesses and the whole country up for pennies on the dollar. And there he is telling you. All the loss of earnings is going to be paid back by people who have no earnings, by increasing the corporate tax rate of what businesses that will be left, and helping the central bank buy up billions of American dollars, American assets for pennies on the dollar. Right in your face. Twitter witnessed an interesting exchange yesterday. This is a bit of fun. A spat between Guns N' Roses singer Axl Rose and the US Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin. And it began when Rose flung an insult at Mnuchin, who is a key figure in the US response to the coronavirus pandemic. But Mr. Mnuchin hit back, questioning the musician's patriotism by saying, "What have you done for the country lately?" he asked. Really? And what have you done, Mr. Mnuchin? Let's just remind the country what you have done. Blocked the people's access to the trust funds. Yes, you. Blocked the government spending programmes. Blocked the FEMA Replacement Disaster Relief Fund. Interfered with young children. Yes, you. And generally being a puppet for the dark forces is what? You, Mr. Mnuchin. Another born too. So social media users also noticed that a flag emoji used in the Treasury Secretary's tweet belonged to Liberia, which, although very similar to the American flag, only has one star. How interesting that Mr. Mnuchin had the Liberia flag. Why? Because that was the place where the public got their very first mention of the then called Manor World Holding Trust. Interesting indeed. Now, his original tweet was then deleted and replaced with one showing the correct flag, but not before the mistake was screen grabbed and shared. So Mr. Rose carried on. It's official. Whatever anyone may have previously thought of Stephen Mnuchin, he's officially an asshole. I concur. Rose mocked him further for the mix-up, saying he hadn't realised we're hoping to emulate Liberia's economic model, but unlike this administration, I'm not responsible for 70,000 plus deaths. Oops. Two more before this is the sub-intel. A lot of the sub-intel has been moved into op-eds and some of it into the intel. Tech news outlet .-LA recently reported that researchers at the University of Southern California, Emory University and the University of Texas Health Science Center have received a federal grant to create a mobile app for contact tracing the novel coronavirus. Here we go. The system will track a person's real-time location and symptoms and calculate a personal COVID-19 risk score. Concerns about privacy are being raised, along with the potential for employers to require workers to reveal their score as a condition of receiving a benefit, entering a building, or returning to their office. It has also been noted that China's surveillance scoring system has already blocked 23 million citizens from travelling by plane or train, and blacklisted over 13 million citizens as, quote, untrustworthy, unquote. Clowns in Panic show? Anyone? Like the show Continuum I kept referring to, of what's coming? Recently, some people in our group took umbrage that some stimulus checks were paid out when I said none would. And I did explain that there was stolen funds that facilitated it, and too few checks would follow, which didn't appease some people with an agenda. But here we are now, over a month later, and where are the checks? Could it actually be they have no funds after all? Of course, at first we had the excuse the IRS equipment was outdated. Then they said they'd sent checks out to the wrong banks. Then another delay due to Trump adding his name to the checks, allegedly, was another reason for the delay. Now, the population who would receive these checks are likely around 200 million, give or take. It could be less. And it's now over a month to pay out these checks. Now, when you put it in comparison with the USPS, who delivers 155 million mails per day, they could have delivered those checks in 2 days at that rate. And now I find out this week they're up to something else. They're sending checks out to dead people. The family that reported this, not one of them have received a stimulus check except the dead father, who's been dead many, many months. Do you really think this is all real still? Let's post out many checks to dead people and it makes it look like we've paid more out. Send a load to dead people who can't cash them, and so they had the illusion they have no funds. At which point do the public realise they've been duped? Hi all and welcome back. of what will be a fairly lengthy intel. And two of these, the first two, are actually news items, but it needs to tie in, and certainly ties in with previous intel of what has gone on and what is going on. And the first two are linked. An independent UN human rights expert warned on Friday that the new Israeli coalition government's plan to proceed with annexing significant parts of the occupied West Bank will be a blow to the international order and undermine prospects for a negotiated settlement. Now, according to Michael Link, the UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in the Palestinian territory occupied since 1967, quoted, Israel's decision to unilaterally march ahead with the planned annexation on July the 1st undermines human rights in the region and would be a severe body blow to the rules-based international order. And Link expressed alarm that Israel's annexation plans are being supported and facilitated by the United States. If the annexation plans proceed, what would be left of the West Bank would become a Palestinian Bantustan, an archipelago of disconnected islands of territory surrounded and divided up by Israel with no connection to the outside world, according to that reporter. Now, the plan includes the Jordan Valley, which I warned of last year, funny enough, and if brought to fruition would lead to a cascade of bad human rights consequences, and going ahead with it would also further undermine any remaining prospect for a just and negotiated settlement, he said. The plan would crystallise a 21st century apartheid, leaving in its wake the demise of the Palestinians' right to self-determination. Legally, morally, politically, this is entirely unacceptable. Now, human rights violations arising from Israeli occupation would only intensify after the annexation, Link said, and the UN expert said that annexation had been strictly prohibited under international law since the adoption of the Charter of the United Nations in 1945. Then why hasn't it been implemented? Why has the US, who are in bed with AIPAC and the lobbyists, allowed to veto every bill? Israel, the country, and the clowns that run it, not the people, have had more violations of the UN than all the countries on the rest of the world combined, and never been pulled up once. This goes back to the Pope piece mentioned earlier and the Caliphate. That's what they're doing. They're not going back to the perceived biblical borders. Oh no. That goes all the way to Egypt and right across to Turkey and eventually back to India. Go and look at the war zones on the map. It also goes halfway down that peninsula, because that's what it said in the Bible. Unreal. The fact that this is now being highlighted proves further the war between the Rothschilds and the Black Sun. And here is another example. An actual report from the Department of Justice Office of Public Affairs for immediate release on April the 30th. Israel's largest bank, Bank Hapoalim, admits to conspiring with US taxpayers to hide assets and income in offshore accounts. Bank Hapoalim, Switzerland, no surprise, pleads guilty, and Bank Hapoalim BM enters into deferred prosecution agreement for criminal misconduct and agreed to pay nearly $875 million in fines. Jeffrey A. Rosen, the Deputy Attorney General of the United States, Richard E. Zuckerman, the Principal Deputy Assistant Attorney General of the Justice Department's Tax Division, Jeffrey S. Berman, the United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York, and Don Fort, the Chief of the IRS, Criminal Investigation IRS-CI, announced today the guilty plea of Bank Hapoalim Switzerland Limited and filing of criminal charges against Bank Hapoalim BM for conspiring with US taxpayers to hide more than $7.6 billion in more than 5,500 secret Swiss and Israeli bank accounts. Remember the money that Kim pulled back? Oops. And the income generated in these accounts from the IRS. BHS Chief Executive Officer appeared on behalf of the bank to enter the guilty plea before the US District Judge Mary K. Weisgersil, and as part of today's resolution, along with resolutions entered into with state and federal partners, Bank Hapoalim BM, which is Israel's largest bank, and Bank Hapoalim Switzerland, its Swiss subsidiary, agreed to pay approximately $874.27 million back to the US Treasury, the Federal Reserve, and also to the New York State Department of Financial Services. Wonder where the stimulus check money came from. Today's resolution is the second largest recovery by the Department of Justice in connection with its investigation since 2008 into facilitation of offshore US tax evasion by foreign banks. And today's resolution and payment of $874 million make clear that tax evasion cannot be taken lightly, according to Jeffrey Rosen, and a fair tax system requires even-handed compliance. Indeed it does. Quite why it takes two dark forces to be battling before people get fined is beyond me, but at least it's a start. And honest conduct by all participants in this system. That's a laugh. The Department of Justice continues to aggressively prosecute banks and other financial institutions that help US taxpayers conceal their income and assets in offshore bank accounts, according to the Deputy Assistant Attorney General, Mr. Zuckerman. And today, Bank Hapoalim is being held accountable for its conduct, and it has admitted to its crimes and will surrender all fees it earned, repay the United States for lost tax revenue, and also pay a substantial fine. On it goes. So Israel's largest bank and its Swiss subsidiary have admitted not only failing to prevent but actively assisting US customers to set up secret accounts to shelter assets and income and to evade taxes, according to US Attorney Jeffrey Berman. And the combined payment approaching $1 billion reflects the magnitude of the tax evasion by the US bank's US customers and the size of the fees the banks collected to provide this illegal service and the gravity of the illegal conduct. So they were charging people to do it as well. There is no excuse for a foreign financial institution to unlawfully assist wealthy Americans in flouting their responsibilities to pay their taxes, said the IRS Criminal Investigation Chief Don Fort. With today's guilty plea, Bank Hapoalim is taking responsibility for their role in deliberately breaking the law and undermining the integrity of this nation's tax system. Offshore tax evasion is a top priority for IRS criminal investigation. Really? And what about that 800 billion that went out of the IRS to a Swiss bank, remember? Perhaps they need to look in-house a bit more. Anyway, they said they are wholeheartedly committed to bringing offenders to justice. And today's resolution serves as proof that financial institutions engaging in tax fraud face dire criminal and financial consequences for their behaviour. One thing I didn't notice was any arrests. The vast majority of New Yorkers follow the rules and pay their taxes, thereby contributing their fair share towards critical state and federal government operations and public services, said Superintendent Lacewell of New York State Department of Financial Services. But she said there are some, however, who went to great lengths to avoid paying their share, and Bank Hapoalim offered a whole array of services to US citizens, including New Yorkers, that knowingly facilitated their tax evasion. DFS will not tolerate such behaviour from banks that operate in the state of New York. Cough, cough. Excuse me while I laugh. The DFS thanks our federal partners at the US Department of Justice, the Department of the Treasury, and the Federal Reserve Board for their assistance and coordination during this investigation. Now, the agreements and resolutions include agreements with BHBM and BHS, collectively the bank, under which the bank agreed to accept responsibility for its conduct by stipulating to the accuracy of extensive statements of facts, and BHBM further agreed to refrain from all future criminal conduct, implement remedial measures, and fully cooperate with further investigations into hidden bank accounts. I wonder who unearthed that. Well, regular members will know. Assuming BHBM's continued compliance with its agreement, the government has agreed to defer prosecution of BHBM for a period of 3 years. Really? Imagine if you did this. Anyone listening? It's an immediate arrest. Why the difference? After which time the government will seek to dismiss the charge against BHBM. And according to documents that were filed in Manhattan Federal Court this week, BHBM is Israel's largest bank and operates primarily as a retail bank with approximately 250 branches throughout Israel and more than 2.5 million accounts. And in addition to retail banking services, BHBM offered private banking services for onshore and offshore customers through its retail branches and its global private banking centre. BHBM also wholly owned Poalim Trust Services Limited, POALIM, which provided trust information, formation and also management services. Outside Israel, BHBM owned BHS, which is the Swiss subsidiary that provided the private banking. Rothschilds. BHS is headquartered in Zurich and at times during the prosecution period had branches in Geneva, Luxembourg and Singapore. BHBM also had branches in New York, Miami, the Cayman Islands, the UK and Jersey. From at least in or about 2002 and continuing at least or about 2014, no, it went much further than that, the bank conspired with employees, US customers and others to 1. Defraud the United States with respect to taxes, 2. File false federal tax returns, and 3. Commit tax evasion. Employees of BHBM and BHS assisted US customers in concealing their ownership and control of assets and funds held at the bank, which enabled those US customers to evade their US tax obligations by engaging in the following conduct: assisting US customers with opening and maintaining accounts in the name of pseudonyms. There they go with their name changes again, a bit like Team Bubba really, same people. Code names, trust accounts and offshore nominee entities. Opening customer accounts for known US customers using non-US forms of identification, enabling US taxpayers to evade US reporting requirements on securities earnings in violation of the bank's agreements with the IRS, providing hold mail services for a fee, avoiding any correspondence regarding the undeclared account being sent to the US. So in other words, blind mail. Offering back-to-back loans for US taxpayers to enable them to access funds in the United States that were held in offshore accounts at the bank in Switzerland and Israel, and also processing wire transfers or issuing checks in the amounts of less than $10,000 that were drawn on the accounts of US taxpayers or entities in order to avoid triggering scrutiny. At least 4 senior executives of the bank, including 2 former members of BHS Board of Directors, were directly involved in aiding and abetting tax evasion of US taxpayers. Under today's resolution, the bank is required to cooperate fully with ongoing investigations, which will no doubt have a much larger fine based on the previous one, and it may later uncover regarding US related accounts. The bank is also required to disclose information consistent with the Department of Justice Swiss bank programme relating to accounts closed between January 2009 and December 2019. And the agreements provide no protection from criminal or civil prosecution for any individuals. BHBM will pay a total of $214.38 million, which has 3 parts. First, BHBM has agreed to pay $77.8 million in restitution to the IRS, which represents the unpaid taxes resulting from BHBM's participation in the conspiracy. Second, BHBM has agreed to forfeit $35.6 million to the United States, which represents gross fees, not profits, that the bank earned on its undeclared accounts between 2002 and 2014. And finally, BHBM has agreed to pay a penalty of $100.8 million. BHS will pay out a total of $402.5 million, which also has three parts. They agreed to pay $139 million in restitution to the IRS, which represents the unpaid taxes. Second, agreed to forfeit $124.6 million in gross fees to the United States. And finally, they've agreed to pay a fine of $139 million. And these payments were approved by Judge Vyaskil today in connection with BHS's plea and sentencing. Both the penalty and the fine amounts take into consideration that the bank, after initially providing deficient cooperation through an inadequate internal investigation, no surprise there, and the provision of incomplete and inaccurate information and data to the government, and thereafter conducted a thorough internal investigation, provided client identifying information and cooperated in ongoing investigations and prosecutions. Ongoing being the operative word. And the bank further implemented remedial measures to protect against the use of its services for tax evasion in the future. The Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System is also announcing that it has reached a resolution with BHBM, by which BHBM has agreed to a consent order, certain remedial steps to ensure its compliance with US law in its ongoing operations, and a civil monetary penalty of $37.35 million. Additionally, the New York State Department of Financial Services is announcing a similar resolution by which BHBM has agreed to cease and desist order and a monetary penalty of $220 million. Now, this agreement marks the third time an Israeli bank has admitted to similar criminal conduct. The bank Leumi Group, Leumi, in December of 2014, and Mizrahi Tefahot Bank Limited in March 2019 entered into DPAs with the Department of Justice, admitting that they conspired with US taxpayers to prepare and present false tax returns to the IRS by hiding income and assets in offshore bank accounts in Israel and elsewhere around the world. Deputy Attorney General Rosen, Principal Deputy General Zuckerman, US Attorney Berman, and the Chief Fort commended special agents of the IRS criminal investigation who investigated this case, and Chief Assistant Todd A. Ellenwood and Senior Litigation Counsel Nanette Davis of the Tax Division, Assistant U.S. Attorney Sega K. Ravi, and Timothy V. Capozzi of the United States Attorney Office for the Southern District of New York, who prosecuted this case. Principal Deputy Assistant General Zuckerman also thanked Assistant Chief Kathleen Barry and former trial attorney Timothy Russo of the Tax Division for their assistance. And there you have it. Further evidence of the Black Sun War against the Rothschilds in a nutshell. And QAnons need to get more aware of who and what they are celebrating as the recent takeover of the Fed. It was not formed by the people, but the Black Sun. The Rothschilds are bad. There's no getting away from that. And all of their ilk need to return to source. All of them are corrupted and not redeemable. But the Black Sun are no different. They and the Rothschilds are two peas in the same pod. Evil personified. Next piece. The world backstage. is in utter carnage and chaos currently. They cannot control what they have done or implement it, and they have no solutions to fix it either. And the only thing they're relying on now is public patience. The Black Sun of Asia was who launched the virus as a depopulation program without thinking who would run their world for them with the majority of the people gone. They contacted Kim this week requesting funding. Really. And they were refused until they come up with a valid plan, which will never arrive, as they cannot come up with a plan that keeps them 100% in control. The clowns appear to think that M, the Dark Prince, and the Destroyer are all going to return. And this is just another one of M's infamous tests. Good luck with that, because that's not happening. As part of potentially the cover-up of the virus, there are rumours, yes, I said rumours, on the back channels this week of 20 to 30 million people in China are dead, and not from the virus either. Like I said, rumours at this point. Another one of the clown plans that is in planning is to create a full-scale war between China and America. Again, overlooking the fact that that requires funds they don't have. It also overlooks the fact that they are not in full control of the weapons that are pointing at each country either. Again, it's the Ouroboros plan, a non-thinking program. Next piece. The clowns are also playing out the biblical 4-horse apocalypse game as well. So what does that entail? Well, it consists of sword, famine, wild beasts and plague. And in John's Revelation, the first horseman is on a white horse carrying a bow and given a crown. Macron, riding forward as a figure of conquest, perhaps invoking pestilence, Christ or the Antichrist. The second carries a sword and rides a red horse and is the creator of war. The third is a food merchant riding upon a black horse, symbolizing famine. And the fourth and final horse is pale green, and upon it rides death, accompanied by Hades. That's what they're up to again. All hail the fake gods and demigods again. And not one of them is valid, and neither is that book, called the Bible, but pronounced by bull, as in by bullshit. We'll have more on that later. In fact, no we won't. We'll have more on an up-and-coming show on that. Now, the sword and the wild beasts have not happened yet, as that involves war. But the plague is already underway. And contrary to most who focus on wrong things, so is the famine. Yet more religious jackassery, and the sooner people drop that programme, the better chance for us all. Next item. The council mentioned the 1/3 deal again. 1/3 to the Black Sun, 1/3 to the Rothschilds, and 1/3 to the people. And they refused again. Why? Because they know we will win with our third, even if the two of them combine. Because they can't have any control over our third is why. Now, one observer of their world described this week the remaining top order as going kamikaze. Well, I'm not surprised. I would say that is human nature. But their humanity left their vessel a long time back. But think about it. If you had done their crimes, wouldn't you go kamikaze? And this is what's happened. We have pushed them into a position where they have no options. And now the Twilight Corridor analogy described in the last show brings that to the fore in full detail. What has been done is cutting their energy harvesting flow on the higher scale, and that will never be returning, hence the panic. Creating fear, loosh, and making threats is all they have left. Releasing frequencies to cause people to lose their mind, have doubts, and turn nasty on people is being evidenced not only in our group, but everywhere. The source energy, first released in May 2018, was the compression event. It squeezed them out of the shadows and into the light. It also squeezed out more of the dark aspects in people in general, again, as has been evidenced. Purging out the darkness contained within us all. The day of the Svarog has increased their panic, and the people's. Maybe social distancing is symbolic and is useful in this time, as most people ignore each other anyway. Most of humanity are just not nice to themselves or each other. And some will not agree with that, and that's fine. But the question for those who disagree is, why isn't the earth a nicer place then? You can't argue with that point. And what is going on now is a purge. And it will be unpleasant for some time to come, until the clowns and the people, awake or not, accept their own part in creating a world filled with hatred, mistrust, violence, death, envy, greed, cynicism, and bitterness. And for people who ask, what can I do? Fix and improve you is your role in it. That's it. You change you with a world full of algorithms and repeat programs changes the whole world. You do realise that. That is the power you have. You fix you has just changed the whole planet. With regards to the clowns, like I have said, time is our friend, not theirs, in terms of the over-controlling nature of this planet. But a word of caution, time is not the people's friend either now, as more and more will fall, riddled with their own programs and inability to address it. There have been many positives over the last decade, which people have a tendency to forget. Their harvesting of us is rendered a dwindling program, with the trust not in their possession for the next 500 years, whether it opens or not. The day of Svarog for the next 1008 years. Oops. Adds a whole new layer of the potential of rebuilding a world that not only creates more light, but an opportunity for our species to create proper adults. The focus is not what we haven't done, releasing the trust funds, but what we have done, what has happened and what was prevented from happening. And it's something many will struggle to comprehend, the sheer enormity of it all. Maybe getting ugly for the people is an event that needs to happen, as a constant reminder to never let yourselves be ruled in this manner again. The info in our shows will be required going forward for many, and that has to be taught on all levels to begin to understand the depth of it all. 16,500 years of control systems wields thousands of rabbit holes, not just one. But in one decade, we have managed to crush it into small fragments, which is extraordinary in and of itself. But it's only of value if enough people change themselves and implement what is laid out in part 2 of the People's Club Human Progression Ideals. The answer, as it always was, lies within us. Hi all and welcome back. This next piece is why we don't stop believing, as new people are joining the fray by the day. And here is something that really cheered me up today. There's a positive, poignant and classic example. I'm going to play an 8-minute audio. Listen closely.
You know, as a police officer, I'm compelled to make this video. I've been in law enforcement for 10 years, and I'm speaking to my peers, other fellow officers, people in any kind of law enforcement position. I've seen officers nationwide enforcing tyrannical orders against the people, and I'm hoping it's the minority of officers, but I'm not sure anymore, because every time I turn on the television, every time I look to the internet, I'm seeing people arrested or cited for going to church, for traveling on the roadways, for going surfing, opening their businesses, going to the park with their families, or doing nails out of their own house, using their own house as a place of business, and having undercover agents go there and arrest them and charge them with what? With a crime? I don't know what crime people are committing by doing nails in their own house. But we're seeing this more and more and more, and we need to start looking at ourselves as officers and thinking, is what I'm doing right? Now, I want to remind you that regardless of where you stand on the coronavirus, we don't have the authority to do those things to people just because a mayor or a governor tells you otherwise. I don't care if it's your sergeant or your chief of police. We don't get to violate people's constitutional rights because somebody in our chain of command tells us otherwise. It's not how this country works. Those are de facto arrests. You know, we're violating people's rights and taking money from them, or even worse, arresting them and depriving them of their freedom when they are exercising their constitutional rights. So let's talk about that. Let's read something right here off of the Declaration of Independence. All men are created equal. Among these, we have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their power from the consent of the governed, meaning our power and any government official's power is derived from the people. Okay? We don't hold power over our citizens. It's contradictory to everything that our country stands for. And this is what I'm seeing. First Amendment rights, telling people they can't go to church, freedom of religion. Okay? Telling people they can't protest, freedom of assembly. Fourth Amendment violations, illegal traffic stops to check for papers. What are you, the Gestapo? Is this 1930s Nazi Germany? You don't get to stop people unless you have reasonable suspicion or probable cause that they have committed a crime. And I know people that have personally been stopped saying, we want to see papers showing that you're essential.
David 2, copy a phone call.
That is not how our job works, okay? What really has been pissing me off lately is the fact that these officers that are going out here and enforcing these tyrannical orders, what they're doing is they're making my job and my safety, or they're putting my job and my safety at risk. Because what you're doing is you're widening the gap between public trust and law enforcement officers. And what that's going to do is it's going to, I mean, look at what's happened to law enforcement in the last 10 years. Less and less public trust, and more often than not, that is a result of isolated incidents that get blown out of proportion. They're not isolated anymore. They're happening every single day. And the thing that I want you guys to realize is that our power that we hold as law enforcement officers is nothing more than a facade. It's a badge and a gun. And people, you don't realize, if you haven't lived in anarchy, if you haven't seen combat, things can be stripped from people in a heartbeat. And that's what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid that these actions are going to wake a sleeping giant, i.e. the American people, okay? They are going to be put in a position where they won't have their rights trampled anymore. And us as law enforcement officers, we'll have our ability to enforce the law stripped from us in about 10 minutes, okay? I think what is going to happen if this continues is we're going to see bloodshed in the streets, okay? I don't want to see bloodshed in the streets on either side of this coin. I don't want to see fellow officers get injured or killed, and I certainly don't want to see citizens get injured or killed. And I promise you, most of you out there doing these tyrannical acts against our citizens, you're not ready for combat. You're not mentally or physically ready for combat in the first place. I promise you, you don't want to go through that, and I hope I never have to go through that again. You don't get to just say, well, I'm doing this because I was told to do so, or I'm following orders, or I need to keep this job. Guess what? I need to keep this job more than anybody. I have 3 young children. I have 2 houses. Like, I have the same sob story that the rest of you guys have. But my personal choices and my living arrangements, no matter what they are, don't allow me to trample on people's rights. And I don't understand why that concept is so hard for people to understand. Listen, you need to stand up for what's right. You need to, if you're part of a department or an agency that is asking people or asking their officers or their deputies to impose on people's rights and infringe on their freedoms, you need to step up and say, no, that's not me. That's not what I signed up for, and that's going against my oath. And if that costs you your job, so be it. At least you'll be able to look at yourself in the mirror at night. I've already expressed this to my department. And luckily for me, I come from a department that I feel like my chain of command shares my view, but I don't care what department you're part of or what your chain of command thinks. You don't get to trample on people's liberty. And so, as a special operations veteran, I've fought on the streets of Iraq under the U.S. government's guise of freedom. And I'm telling you what, the American people are going to you are going to wake a sleeping giant, and they are going to fight 10 times harder for their freedom on their soil than anything you've ever seen before. And if that's something you're willing to face, then keep trampling on people's rights. But I promise you, the American spirit of defiance is going to rise again, and it's going to be a big problem for our country. So I'll leave you with this, something that I learned as an E-nothing in the Army. No matter what situation you're put in, if you look inside yourself and ask yourself one question, am I doing the right thing? You ask yourself that, you know the answer. And no amount of money or no order or law or anything should be able to make you go against doing the right thing. So I'm imploring officers to look inside themselves and ask themselves, is this what I want to be doing to my citizens? And I think the answer is clear. And if we all stand up together, guess what? It'll be a non-issue, no factor, because people and law enforcement will be united like we should be.
I've got to thank that man. There's very few people who are brave and will sacrifice for the greater good, sadly. And this is what I've been warning about since Cosmic Voice. And I asked an ex-cop to come on the show after he appeared on PBS, warning of the same things. And this guy is 100% right and sees the dangers not only to the public but his own profession. I did a piece recently warning if cops didn't stand up, it will get ugly. That profession will become pariah status amongst the populace unless more brave cops like him stand up and speak out. And one hopes his colleagues have the courage and conviction to support him going forward, because the system will attack him, as I know only too well. And he will need a lot of support from his fellow officers. Finally, we have a voice in the so-called authority group speaking with some common sense, which is a sad rarity these days in a world of followers and scripts. For someone to actually see what's going on, assess it, and have the courage to speak it. So thank you, Mr. Anderson of MPU. A message for the real militia. Go and support and protect this man as your own oath demands. Seek out others like him and support them as well. Create and build a network quickly before the bloodshed begins. we don't have much time. This is all-out war on the people of the planet, and yet some people want to spend their time on social media denigrating one man or one group. Focus, people, is what's required. Support the very few who will sacrifice their life and lifestyle to help you all. This world is filled with cowardice, and if you can't show your own backbone and courage, at least support those who will. This song is for Mr. Anderson. That was Hero of the Day to Mr. Anderson of, I presume it's the Military Police Unit, MPU. Correct me if that's not right. But courage and speaking common sense is rarer than rock and roll shit, sadly. And so it's kind of pleasing for me, because whilst I've not got a very high opinion of cops, both here or the UK for that matter, because of their tendency and thuggish behaviour, most of which is not necessary. A lot of it down to the Israeli training that then renders the citizen almost subhuman. So, like an open book to attack. But that guy is right to be concerned about his fellow law enforcement, not only of their poor actions, but also the future, because they are the line between the people and the system, and they will get it. If this goes on much longer, they will not be able to hold it back, and it's going to get real ugly. I mentioned it earlier. It will get far worse before it gets better. It has to. The people have to stand up and raise their voice in a non-violent way. That is imperative. We do not require or need violence to achieve our aims. The people always had the power, they just fail to recognise it. So the more cops that come on board, the better. Mr. Anderson wants to come on our show. I would welcome him with open arms so we can have a proper debate and start healing some of the wounds between law enforcement and the people. So the show's been going 2 hours, and we've heard all kinds of atrocities going on. Some hope, some unpleasantness, famines, 4 horses, the apocalypse, etc., etc. And then we have the social media people, the non-focused people. And because the People's Club is doing really well, both in terms of subscribers and also increased donations, the usual suspects decide we cannot possibly have something that is real, for one, transparent, oh my God, someone's transparent, honest and open within the alternative community. So let's send our members out to trash it, which is essentially what's taken place over the last week or so. Now, this is largely covered from an overview point of view, not to denigrate. In fact, I don't even name the people, apart from one, because he's, let's just say, linked to it all. But it also provides some answers as well and clarity on what the People's Club and the Trust is all about. And so it's a good opportunity. Now we've got a load of new members for them to catch up with the older members who are more familiar with it. Or it's a nice refresher for the older ones. So here are some of the interactions to do with the People's Club this week. One was a request was made for funding by a member on behalf of a member who had been in the group less than 3 weeks and is from Spain. Not his fault. And 2, someone asked for the evidence of any member who has actually been helped by the People's Club. And like Randy Morgan's, also questioned the validity of us paying for the wheelchair recently for one of our members. So there's a few things that come up regarding this. 1, the People's Club was designated for America only, initially anyway. 2, do we receive donations from people outside of America? Yes, and it's voluntary. 3, I decided that that was not fair to other countries and created the THI country groups where the donations can be kept and sent out within that country, administered by the groups themselves. 4, the People's Club has helped long-standing members with aid when requested. 5, currently there is a vote that is done by the 3 directors of the People's Club on whether to send funds to people who need help. 6, eventually this will be done on a wider scale and we will have many members voting on when, where or if the funds will be spent. 7, the People's Club is a private company owned by me, but will eventually be owned by you all. 8, do the very people who question the directors of where the money goes, how it is collected, how it is spent, do that to any other private company? If not, why? 9, why is it always the ones who don't contribute to helping the people are the ones who make complaints, accusations or demands? 10, many of you will have your own companies or place of work. Would you or they take kindly to someone prying into your private business or company? Then why is the People's Club different? 11, and this is the key part. Do people consider the privacy of those who have been assisted by the People's Club? Perhaps they would not like to reveal they have been helped. Do these people consider that? Of course they don't. I've been very open as to the details. I've posted yearly results of all donations and expenditures. I've done 2 videos and numerous Zoom calls explaining the TPC, its goals and how it all works. And yet bitter and twisted people, it seems, would rather not us all work together and provide lasting solutions for we the people. They would rather just sit there and have their paychecks and money be harvested each week by rogue elements so they can screw them deeper into the ground. It's absolutely the most ridiculous behaviour ever. Now these people, some of which are agency operated, are the main reason humanity is in the position it is in now. No ifs and buts. Do nothings and let's keep the harvest system going, shall we, is their forte. So if you are one of the ones removed from our group this week, I ask you all, what are you doing for humanity? Because if all you're doing is trashing one man or one group who is at least trying to do something, you in essence might as well go and join the Rothschilds and the Black Sun as an official member, as you're doing more for them than your fellow people. We spoke about famine earlier. Whilst these people are busy trashing the People's Club, this is what's been going on this week. Tens of millions of chickens gassed, millions of gallons of milk poured out, literal mountains of potatoes and other produce left to rot, hundreds of thousands of pigs and cattle euthanized, millions upon millions of Americans out of work, losing cars, homes and businesses and wondering how they're going to feed their families. Crime is skyrocketing, criminals being made out of honest citizens, suicides increasing and relationships ruined. Houston, if you think we had a problem before, you ain't seen nothing yet. And people in our group think the THI, TPC and the Trust are the problem, given what's going on all around you. Like I said, lack of focus. It was then followed up with attacks on the Trust with the most non-thinking questions ever, and followed by accusations I don't answer the questions. I've answered all the questions multiple times in multiple shows, comments and Zoom calls. So I'm guessing now is the Where is Your Proof program has failed, as the new one is I don't answer questions. Well, I'm answering questions here and now. But then you get gems of questions like these, and I do wonder, and I do like to give benefit of the doubt these are not troll-based questions, but at best they're just plain non-thinking questions of staggering proportions. Quote, why can't the Trust donate to the People's Club? Certainly that would be easy, as no banks would be involved. Unquote. Oh dear. If it was that easy, do you not think it would have been done already? But as the People's Club account is in a bank, how are no banks involved in the transaction? The Trust has sent funds to the People's Club account several times, one of which I witnessed for $18.3 million last summer, and it had to be withdrawn back due to blocks and attempts to steal it out of the back door by Comex. We covered it in a show. But the simplistic and dismissive line of questioning and non-thought-out based solutions rolled on with another member this week. Why can't the Trust just give land, an oil refinery and a gold mine to the People's Club? Was the question. Again, overly simplistic, again appearing like these transactions are all so easy to do, whilst overlooking completely the people we are up against. And it's just staggering levels of non-thinking. Why? Well, let's say Kim took up this option and we sent this member with a piece of paper to a gold mine not too far from here. Lots of gold in there. And that person proceeded to make a claim against that said mine. What do you think will happen next? Manhandled and threatened is the best option. Arrested and jailed, the middle option. And the worst case, shot dead for trespassing. Do you really still think those suggestions were thought out? I did a whole piece recently on enforcement. Listen to it again for more clarity. But it wasn't finished. Next came the saviour-based programme thinking post, which has come up quite a lot recently. That somehow myself, THI, the People's Club and the Trust are responsible for everything. So just surprised we haven't been blamed for the virus yet. So taken from this particular post, this world is in a state of hell. I agree. And yet the Trust holds all the money and assets on this planet and has a quantum system so powerful that it can pull money back if not used for the good. Correct. 35 million clowns on the planet is very small compared to 800 or more billion people on this planet, and yet you can't release any of it because of 35 million clowns. Oh dear. So let's break this down, shall we? First, it's actually 37 million clowns, and the population is 7.5 billion, not 800. Then we have a complete overlook of the situation of why we can't release the funds, which has been explained multiple times in multiple shows and yet ignored when putting it out in this line of questioning. Yes, the Trust holds all the assets, but the clowns currently control the delivery of the assets and or money. I'm going to repeat that again. Yes, the Trust holds all the assets, but the clowns currently control the delivery of the assets and or money. The clowns do not want the people to have said money, as they won't be able to control it. Fact. And that is an answer that's been given hundreds of times and yet ignored by these people because CNN never told them so. And another reason why it's not being delivered yet is the clowns have guns and enforcement and we don't. On she went. And the UPC can't help us. Who is the UPC? I know of the UPU and also the Universal Council, but I've never heard of the UPC. Either way, they are not there to help us per se. Again, it's something I've said hundreds of times and apparently overlooked. They will intervene when a council vote is in the majority to stop a certain situation that violates the peace treaty, or if someone is going to destroy the planet. They will not, listen closely, they will not engage on human-to-human issues. Now, I personally think that is a bit too restrictive. and I have addressed it many times. But asking for the UPU or the council to fix our mess is a saviour programme. On she goes. You say you pull money in and you have given money out. I listen well, and at the same time some transparency would be a good thing to see of who's gotten the money. Well, if this is to do with a trust, how do you think America has been funded for the past 2 years? You want proof? Go and ask Mr. Trump. Now, the trust has pulled back from providing funds to the American government early this year, and look at the mess it's in. If this is to do with the People's Club, I have sent out financial figures each year of income and expenditures, and I don't reveal who is helped for that person's privacy, which causes me issues personally, as it would be easier for me to announce the names of everyone who the TPC has helped. But that is not the right thing to do. Again, something overlooked by these one-tracked, negative-based mindset people. Proof should not be a problem if Langley and everyone else knows you're trying to be a humanitarian leader. Well, proof has been given to those in the right state of mind, and their narrative is not being steered by others. And as for the mention on Langley, oh dear. On she goes. You said to think differently. I am, and I'm trying to get real proof and answers other than just listening. Well, I'm sorry, but if you think this is thinking differently, then you're clearly in a wrong headspace. Thinking differently is taking your own responsibility. All of us, myself included. This whole post reeks of a saviour programme. Since when has a saviour programme ever worked out for humanity? And you and the other listeners have had more proof than any other group or organisation. Next, can you show real money from the People's Club that you have helped? Now, this is based on Randy Morgan's input. He may hide behind the scenes and has been a major source of trouble within our group in this past week. 8 or 9 of the 10 removed in the last week were all friends of Randy Morgan's. Coincidence? You decide. So like I said, I've posted the People's Club financials at the end of the year when I'm not obligated to do so. For transparency, you see, for everyone to view. And like I said, the TPC is a private company, in case people forget. I just choose to run it transparently and involve the all. And this is what you get in response. You do things the right way, not like the old system, like the Israeli bank, secret accounts and fancy trusts, fake trusts, shell companies. No, we've been up front. And all you get is baseless accusations and, quite frankly, libelous accusations also. And like I said, did the poster consider the privacy of those who have been helped? Maybe they didn't want their help they received be published for pride reasons. Of course not, as that would require thinking on their part. But this person, supported by a sister in Morgan's, who is manipulated by his entourage of backstabbing handlers outright accused me and the People's Club of being thieves, and yet conveniently provides no such evidence. Why? Because there is none. It's that simple. Then she goes running to other members complaining the latest classic line, I was only asking questions. Accusing people of misappropriating money with no evidence is not asking questions. That is making libelous accusations, and that person is fortunate I neither have the time or money to drag her through the courts along with the others. What this person and others were saying was she was not only questioning my integrity, but the other two directors, Holly Hakes-Peterson and Michelle Hanksa. And that's unforgivable in my book. I don't care what you call me, but doing that to Holly and Michelle is a low blow. Period. Transparency should not be a problem. We are all in this together, she said. Well, there is 100% transparency in this group. And because it's so rare outside of this group, it's not recognisable by the stupid inside it. And that is what bothers many of these other groups, as they are not transparent. But some people who have agendas will never see it. And clearly we're not all in this together. Otherwise, ridiculous, non-thinking comments and overly dismissive and simplistic based solutions would not be so prevalent on our page recently, with or without outside persuasions. Now, I get these line of comments or rhetoric, whilst designed to chip away at me, but it's a slap in the face to all of our group. And personally, they can call me what they like. I don't give a shit. I'm comfortable enough in my own skin to not fall for their ridiculous allegations. But attacking a group that is working for the betterment of humanity, whether you like the show host or not, is despicable and becomes an extra win for the cabal. Fact. So for the benefit of the new members and a reminder to long-standing members, the above just read out is the main reason we cancelled the Q&A section of our show. Because the questions mostly are not questions to learn, but to denigrate me and this group. And as a reminder, it was the members themselves who requested we cancel the Q&A, not me, due to the examples set above. But a lot of these full-on attacks or veiled attacks are based on guilt, because they have not contributed in the way many of you have in this group. And I'm not just talking about donations either. Many of you have jumped on board and tried to drive a new way for us all, and that makes them feel guilty. Others are envy-based, as one radio show host said recently, having doubted we paid for it to begin with. He then shifted his "you only paid for the wheelchair, so you get all the glory." Oh dear. I guess he didn't have enough lemons that day. And this was after accusing the People's Club of being fake and a scam. So you see, proof and evidence, when presented, will never suffice people with agendas, guilt or envy, or all three. And his counterpart, a known Rothschild family member, also accused the People's Club of being a fake and a scam. And yet he received $200 from the People's Club and a laptop from myself. I guess in his mind, it only became a scam after our members and myself helped him. But me thinks they doth protest too much. But they have agendas to bring us down. And as for the commenters on the page, I'm going to ask, which camp are you in? The people or the Rothschilds and the Black Sun? The divide in the people now is getting more clear by the day, and even in our own group, between those that do actions and those that don't. The latter make accusations, oversimplistic suggestions, and want another saviour programme. And I will tell you here and now, neither I, Kim, THI, the People's Club, or the Trust will be that saviour programme for you. Like, never. You are your own saviour. And all these people are doing is denigrating themselves, seeking others to save them. Because what they're really stating is they can't or won't save themselves. And that is the most damning aspect of it all. And something only the individual can address. You know, I spend 18 hours plus a day just to get people the truth, help and support people. All for no paycheck from my own company, the People's Club. And this is what you get in return from these people? One wonders how many would tolerate this work for one day. Never mind 4 years. But I find it inherently ironic that some people can throw endless questions, accusations and allegations at me, yet will never answer a question posed back. Why is that? And because I asked these people a question back, that makes me a bad guy, does it not? THI, North Carolina. Who defended this person throwing barbs and allegations out, and not only me, but the other two directors. And yet she wouldn't answer a few basic questions in return. The two questions were, why are you making us out as your own personal saviour? Knowledge and protection programme. And you and her are avoiding the question, why did she accuse me of lying about helping the people with the TPC funds? Does that sound fair to you? Seems fair to me, but not to them. But this was not a fair stab at THI either. A post on April the 9th foretold of what was to follow by stating the Kim's system should take people out. Really? You know, a sheer lack of basic understanding on her and her cohort's part. But it was not the poster who initiated it. It was a sister based on her comments on April the 7th. Larry Lodge. Oops. This was a tag team sent in to disrupt the group, and sadly other people around them left because of it. Time always tells whether they all made the right choice. But this is all an example of people being triggered by the onslaught of people oppression. And predictably, they don't attack the source of the problems. They attack the few who are trying to help them And like I said, this is why humanity always struggles to get a foothold, respect or consideration on this planet. And it's indicative of a deeper problem within society. Clowns tell the government what to do, and when things go wrong, the people blame the government. People always ignore the source of the problem, as all too often that source of the problem is actually themselves and their own inability to do their own work. But the clowns and the people now are scattering seeds to the wind everywhere. But our members have at least been taught to see the seeds that are important to us. They're losing the narrative badly now, as evidenced by the army of a group known as fact checkers. What a bunch of clowns they are. Oh, the irony. Fact checkers. Where were these fact checkers for the last 100 years? Nowhere, as they controlled the narrative, you see, and said and got away with the most ridiculous narratives ever, like conspiracy theory, swamp gas, weather balloons, and the list goes on. But the very fact they had to create an army of jackasses checking every piece of information now tells you two things. One, they are in fear, and their own release of information on other factions' programme has backfired on them. And two, they have lost or losing the information war. The people are going to go in panic. The world is about to turn upside down, and there is no smooth transition now. Who is responsible for the ugly transition from old world to the new path? The people. Not the ones who have at least tried, but to the vast majority of the people, awake or not. We have not managed to combine into a group supporting us only. All remain fractured, waiting for saviour programmes, wake clubs, and awake people spending more time arguing, distraction or fake-based news. The majority of which now is spat out of the alt media, never mind the portal people. All of you will have been exasperated personally by the rejection of you and your information as the world burns. And they walk away from their own paychecks, told to stay indoors without an ankle bracelet like some criminal, forced to wear masks, forced to not have a life, forced to social distance, whilst their saviour government is scrabbling to fix a problem that doesn't exist. This picture doesn't need me to tell you our situation is dire. And then what happens is the people turn on each other, as evidenced in the past week or so in our own group. Never mind outside. And you're talking to yourself and nobody's home. I hope that last piece cleared some things up of what the TPC is about and stands for to new members, and a refresher for others. It's rather sad, some people are triggered by this show, but that tells you they have work to do, as we all do, myself included. But with the recent world-based turmoil ongoing, it also allows observers to see where humanity is at. Has there been progression, or have the people gone along with the slavery program? Have some of those who are awake gone back to their safety zone? And the alt media in and of itself has been fascinating to observe based on the feedback from members, as I no longer watch any of the videos or recordings, apart from that police one, for my own sanity. Because the majority of them have no clue what they're talking about. They don't understand the system like THI members do. All have now observed for yourselves the alt media's failed prediction programs. Dates set, dates came, dates went. All have seen the traitors flip-flop to the dark side. All have seen the rise of the trolls working to keep the masses under control. And many of you are now pointing out and observing the faction-based narratives. And now you don't need me to tell you or to point it out. It's all in your face. But the people still believe the old alt media is valid. It's still valid. I warned it was finished back in December 2018. Recently, we've had a return of an older alt media personality pushed forward into the limelight. Predictably, the video gets banned as a means to lure in certain others into the programme, which is all reminiscent of a now failed major alt media personality who cried wolf too many times whilst he followed the script like a sheep with his chickens. But all these are pushing the saviour programmes, as not one of them are providing any solutions to solving what is now a global issue. All of it is just pointing fingers at everybody else. Whether it's me, THI, it's Trump, it's Pelosi, it's Fauci, it's Comey, China, Russia, the Democrats, the Liberals, the left, the right, whatever that means. Take your pick. And as for the end of the alt media, I rest my case. Something else came up this week that was being introduced. Small business loans. They put them out recently, and the same greed-based companies harvested all the money. It's not going to the small people. It's the same conglomerate, corporate or core pirate group entities again. Only they've started a new one where the business loans is being arranged where the owner is responsible for paying back the loan in just 6 years. And no one asks the question as to why the business owners and the people had to pay for this program. Clearly the clowns in Los Angeles who are buying up all the properties, they're not paying back, are they? Or the clowns in New York. Why didn't those people get jail, as mentioned earlier, for the tax bank scandal? It's just rules for them and rules for us, or non-rules for them and all rules for us. So let's get this small business loans down to brutal reality here. Rogue elements deliberately created this virus for depopulation and other programs running in the background to take advantage of it. One is to loot stock markets. Two, loot oil markets, and when they both failed, loot the Social Security, Medicare and the 401ks to provide less than 1 to 2% of the people with the promised stimulus checks. Look, we sent lots of checks out to dead people.
I see dead people.
4, realizing that there is a lot less liquid cash available. They shut down the world's businesses and industries minus their own. 5, with no place open, less people to pay, less circulation of a dwindling money supply, and banks keep the illusion going for a bit longer. There is no money. 6, to accomplish that, they then put the people in the lockdown. 7, having watched people comply all so easily, they begin plotting other draconian measures as no kickback came from the public. 8, with businesses collapsing and or on the brink, the same harvesters wait like vultures to pick over the carcass. Our members were told of this years back and re-warned in January when Warren Buffett was hoarding cash. Why? To buy up the failing businesses that was about to unfold. 9. The BBC correspondent told people directly what they were doing when asked why the lockdown. Because, quote, we haven't infected enough people yet, unquote. 10. You do realise social distancing is an MK Ultra tactic, don't you? Oops. Like putting people in solitary confinement. Why? To break people's psyche and their spirit is why. 11. They are sitting in decorated rooms guffawing of how stupid the humans are and how easily they bow down to the new self-appointed gods. Fact. So back to the small business loans again. So companies are now going to borrow at their own expense for a programme being ran on them by all their governments, as not one spoke out of the real truth, having lost revenue for a minimum of 7 weeks, and so have less funds to play with, and their government pushes them into taking up a loan which the companies have to pay back whilst under financial stress. And we tolerate this shit? Why wasn't the 800 million in fines to the Israeli bank given to the people? Oops, bit of common sense there. Can't do that. No, we should not be tolerating it. And while so many fall for the illusion, it becomes a difficult task. And this is why recently I've asked you all to stand your ground, remain calm 45-55 whilst all around you fall. And they are. But we fight on, as much progress has been made, although at an impasse currently. But largely this whole event has been caused by the work that has been done. And now they're in the public for more to see. And the death rattle has begun. People get frustrated and then project onto others. Yet curiously they don't target rogue people or groups, only the very few who are actually doing something. And there's a massive lesson in and of that, and yet again it explains why humanity has not been out of the pit in thousands of years. The real ones who hurt or damage them, they never approach or make them accountable, and yet will attack ordinary people, some of whom have helped, supported or cared for, are all cast aside all too easily in a volley of nasty words and abusive and controlling behaviours. Life is about choices. Many choices go or turn out wrong, largely due to cultural and societal programming. But those are supposed to be the learning lessons, a chance to future correct your course or path, or so we thought. Yet everywhere you look now, on every level, the same stupid mistakes over and over again. Clowns doing repeat programs over and over since 2012 and failing repeatedly, yet still wonder why it's not working. Perhaps they should have listened to this show a bit more. Could have told them from January 2013 that nothing would ever work again like it used to. Don't believe me? Fine. I will sit back and watch you use vast resources, manpower, endless trolls and your dwindling funds trying to replicate the past programs then, and laugh at your own stupidity, like you do to us. People buy homes in a boom and wonder why the house went tits up and upside down. People buy into several Ponzi and get rich quick schemes, most of which fail, and yet the public still chases the white rabbit, but never catches up to it. The lottery ticket is the same program. It's another tax on we the people, and the same clowns harvest the profits, whilst dangling carrots on a chance of winning and becoming like them. A jackass, basically. As most people with volumes of money are pretentious, fake jackasses. Again, the public rinse and repeat it. People every 4 years hope and believe this next party and elected leader will be different. Was it ever? But they'll repeat it again the next election. And then you have the curious case of repeated behavioural patterns of the abused female, who jumped from one relationship to another with the exact same type of guy. You have many women crying out for love, yet when it's presented with it in their face, they'll shun that for a guy who abuses them. Repeated behaviours. And why is it so many women prefer the bad guys to the nice guys? And people wonder why the good guys in general society hardly ever win. There's a lesson in that. Because the selections are indicative of a wider problem. Good guys are considered untrustworthy. There has to be something not right, and they can't be that nice, and so they will avoid them. Does that make any sort of sense? And like I said at the beginning of the show, how can you build a society when the nurturing archetype mistrusts or neglects the few people who are actually nice and kind-hearted? And it is the few. No matter how much you fudge or gloss over the reality of it all. And it's the classic doublespeak of saying one thing and doing the exact opposite. Has any female questioned themselves as to how and why they do that? Yes, I know, many men are bastards, and I get that. But I did a piece last year asking, what is love? Have you defined it? Clearly not in many cases, given the veracity some females go to defending their males who have used and abused them. All kinds of excuses come out to justify not letting go of the abuser. And it's Stockholm Syndrome on a massive scale. You deserve better. Why are so many men terrified of females these days? Terrified to ask them out, terrified to speak or approach them? Why has so many of that archetype become so cold-hearted and dismissive? How can you demand or request love with a cold and dismissive heart? The answer is you can't. And the answer to the problems faced, as always, lies within you. I'm off to load up on my heart armour, Bose noise-cancelling headphones, hard hat and shielding until the next show. Who would have thought telling the truth, improving people's lives, caring for and helping people while asking for nothing in return would render you a life of lockdown, threats, endless attacks, rejections and verbal abuse, and an almost pariah status. It's a mad world. My name is Thomas Williams. This has been the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show.